Welcome back to the 713 Houston Sportcast. I'm your host, Ruben Calvillo. Now, I'm with the special guest. And when I mean special, I absolutely mean special. He goes by the name on Twitter of I Am Young Ari Gold. He has the best podcast for the Houston Texans. You know, he covers the Texans for Texan Unaffiliated. He has a YouTube channel where he posts it. This man is legit. He has interviews with billobrien, and he's doing one with David Johnson. Yes, the David Johnson who was just traded to. Ari, welcome to the channel, bro. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, bro. I really appreciate it, Ruben. Yeah, I'm a fan of your work. It's small circles in this Texans world, and it's awesome to see what you're building, and I'm just excited to be here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no, if you're excited, man, I couldn't sleep last night. I'm being completely honest with you. But let's get to it, man. So just correct me if I'm wrong. This draft is maybe the most anticipated draft since the inaugural in 2002 because it is run by one man. It is run by billobrien. We haven't had a head coach be the GM. This is his draft. I'm super excited. Is that kind of, okay to say?
I would say most anticipated. I think it's kind of hard to be most anticipated when you don't have a first round pick.
That's true.
I think that I would say it's one of the more important drafts that we've had for sure. I think there's a lot of holes on this team, and there's a lot of areas that need to be addressed, and you have to wonder if they're able to do it given where they're picking.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. As we know, the Houston Texans have the 40th pick. And, I'm going to just give you one guy who I like, Ross Blacklock out of TCU. I think the dude is an absolute monster. And he's from Texas. He's not that far down the road. And the Texans have showed interest in him. I think he could come in, battle Timmy Jernigan for that starting defensive tackle spot. If he's there at 40, I don't know how you don't take him.
Yeah, so I share the same sentiment. I like Blacklock a lot. I think, he's a guy that potentially comes in day one and gives you production. I don't even know if there'll be much of a battle between Jernigan and him. I think they'd probably consider moving Jernigan to the outside, opposite of JJ, and it'd be between Brandon Dunn and Ross Blacklock. I think Ross Blacklock has a ton of potential, and I think when you're picking at 40. In the second round, you're looking for production and potential, and it's very hard to find the combination of the two. And I think Blacklock gives you exactly what you're looking for. He can come in. He's got to develop as a pass rusher, especially on the interior, but he has the potential to really do it. He has violent hands, quick feet. He's an aggressive nature, high motor. I love Blacklock. I think he'd be an ideal pick at 40. Him or Neville Gallimore out of Oklahoma. I think both of those guys. Yeah, I love his hands. That dude is so violent. And when I think of a defensive tackle, I think of violent, quick hands that is able to just kind of shed blocks really quickly, be able to, stop and play a part in the run game and things of that nature. So, but it's interesting because at 40, you have to wonder who's going to be there, right?
Absolutely.
This is the weirdest draft scenario that we could ever be in with everything going on with COVID-19. These guys, the GMs and coaches not being able to meet with the players. GMs are texting Ian Rappaport telling them that these mock drafts have never been more wrong in the history of the draft. It's going to be interesting.
And that's the thing. Who knows who's going to fall? Who knows who's going to ride? With that being said, do you see any situations where the Houston Texans trade up or trade down, or do they stay at 40?
So I've been asked this question a lot. I think that there's one player potentially that if for somehow he falls, and I don't think he will, but if K'Lavon Chaisson falls, let's say to the Niners at 49, or I mean at 31, 49, that's their team. But yeah, if he falls to 31, maybe 29, 30, I think that there's a chance that they package something up to go get him. Now, not having, they don't have a ton of draft capital to be able to trade. So you have to wonder what potentially that can be. And you have to look at the team that they would be trading with. The Niners, they could use wide receiver help. But outside of that, I don't really know what else we could offer. So is it a Keke trade, reunite Keke with Wes Welker in San Francisco, give up the second and the third, or next year's third? I don't know. But I think that's the one name that if I saw slide, I think there's a potential chance that they move up. Outside of that, I don't think that there's a guy.
Yeah, I mean, like, and just that's the thing. Everybody's just worried about what's going to happen. Another name that has thrown out there that the Texans have shown interest in is Terrell Lewis out of Alabama. I think he's an absolute beast. His injury history does concern me a little bit, but if the dude was healthy his first 2 years, I mean, we could be talking about a potential, high first round draft pick. What do you think about Terrell Lewis?
Played at Alabama. That's always a good sign. I question his motor at times. He doesn't seem to be consistent with his effort. That'd be a question mark for me. I don't like his bend around the edge. I think he's an athlete. I think, at 40, I look at this team, and when I think of edge players, I think of Jacob Martin, Whitney Merciless, and Duke Ejiofor. I don't know if you want to add a third guy to that competition between Duke and Jacob Martin. I think you probably want to let those two duel it out for the opposite spot of Whitney. And I also think that you have to see what you have. I don't know if an edge guy is the most ideal situation for this team, but I will say this. I think best player available will be how they address the draft. So if they're in love with Terrell Lewis and he's there, I wouldn't be surprised if they took him.
So I'm glad you mentioned best player available because I want to mention two. Number one, Grant Delpit, safety out of LSU. A lot of people are super, super high on this guy. If he's there at 40, can you see the Houston Texans taking Grant Delpit?
Yes. I could see if he's there at 35, then potentially trading up to get him. I think Delpit, I'm right there with Texans' thoughts as far as what Delpit can bring to this team. Me and Texans' thoughts share a lot of the same sentiments. One of the smartest guys on Twitter, by the way.
Yeah, I just had him on the show. He's a beast.
Yeah, I listened. Yeah, me and him talked on the podcast for an hour and a half. We put out a 4-hour podcast yesterday just talking draft. So I think with Delpit, single high safety, generational safety talent. I think it gives Justin Reed the ability to be moved around a little bit more. You could put Delpit in the back, center field, just kind of roam the field. A lot of people have questions about his tackling. Those same questions were about Justin Reed.
Absolutely.
That's something that can be cleaned up and fixed. It's all about basic technique and understanding how to gain leverage and things like that. I think Delpit is if he's there, you got to steal in the draft, and you got a guy that's coming in and making crazy plays for this team.
Absolutely. And then we're going to move on to the next player. Somebody who a lot of Texans fans will be mad at, if we draft him, Jonathan Taylor, the running back out of Wisconsin. Do you see the Houston Texans taking a running back?
I think the only running back I see potentially that could be taken is if J.K. Dobbins falls to 40.
And they met with them twice.
That's the only player that I think we have a chance at taking at 40. Outside of that, I don't think there's another running back that they're going to even consider.
Really? Okay, cool. So moving on to pick 90, I think that Jordan Elliott will be an absolute, real good get for the Houston Texans. If you guys watched the show, Kenneth the Messenger, he played with Jordan Elliott. So, a lot of ties to Houston. He even said it himself, to Kenneth personally that he would like to come to Houston. I think Jordan Elliott, high motor guy. I think if we manage to get him at 90, will be an absolute good grade for this defense.
Yeah, I love Jordan Elliott. I don't think he's even close to being there in the third. I actually think that him, Blacklock, and Gallimore, you'll probably see a run of defensive tackles taken early in the second. While a lot of people talk about this defensive tackle class and they talk about Kinlaw and Brown out of Auburn, there's not a lot of talk on mock drafts and draft analysts about the other three guys. But those three guys to me they're going to go early. I don't see Elliott being available at 90. A player that if he is available at 90 that I'd feel really good about us taking. I don't see Damon Arnett being there. I think he goes early in the second as well. But Amik Robertson out of Louisiana Tech, small cornerback, 5'8". He's going to have to play slot his entire career, but sure tackler, bulldog, physical, able to play press man, quick speed, great recovery. His transition is amazing, nice footwork. I think Amik Robertson would be an extremely interesting pick for this team because then you're talking about having so much flexibility in the secondary. If Amik can come in and take that slot role, then you have Garion and Roby that can play outside. Lonnie can come in dime formations. So I think Robertson can bring a ton of good things to this team and really give us a lot of things that we're missing.
Yeah, and that's one thing that you want because for the past couple of seasons, our cornerbacks haven't been able to stay healthy at all. So adding, a high, investing a high pick into, the Rick Robinson will be absolutely spectacular, man. Like this, this draft is absolute crazy. You don't know what is going to happen, and then do you see, the Houston Texans taking like an offensive player in the later rounds? I think, Zach Moss, if he's there, will be a good get because, you know, I love David Johnson. He hasn't been healthy. He could come in, not pretty much take over the starting role, but if something does happen, I think Zach Moss will be a good get for these Houston Texans.
Yeah, well, we could talk about David Johnson in a little bit. I think with the running back position, I don't know if we'll see one in the third or fourth. I think the TCU running back I always mess up his last name.
He has a weird last name.
Yeah, Olulua or something like that. He's like 6'2", 235. He's a bruiser. He's built very similar to Derrick Henry. Very powerful running back, but he has the ability to catch out of the backfield as well, which would help this team. Given that if you have three backs that are able to do that, there's just a ton of flexibility in the offense. I like Zach Moss a lot. I think that Zach Moss will probably go in the third. I think he has too much talent to still be there in the fourth or fifth. But I do see the Texans adding some offensive pieces. It's going to have to be the right ones. And yeah. I think that's what a lot of people have to consider when they're talking about this team. I think, potentially a guard, running back, maybe wide receiver. There's not a lot of talk about Van Jefferson for some reason.
And he could be there in the later rounds.
He could be there at 90. Probably the second best route running wide receiver in the draft outside of Jerry Jeudy. So yeah, I think they'll add a piece here or there. It's just going to be about who else is on the board.
I like Taylor Johnson from Minnesota. I think his hands are just absolutely phenomenal, and and he could play special teams. And I love DeAndre Carter, but if you add some competition in there, it wouldn't be bad at all for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, no, I mentioned the other day that Quez Watkins out of Mississippi State would be a very interesting pick in the fifth round. I think he had 4.35 speed. Could potentially battle DeAndre Carter for some returns. DeAndre needs some type of competition on returns for punts and kickoffs. And then, also develop another slot receiver unless, hopefully Kiki takes that next step.
Hopefully.
But, yeah, I definitely think if there's a guy that you can get for the return game, you definitely do it.
So, and then we have, 3 7th round picks. Like, do you see them being used in any bargaining chip? Because 3 7th is a lot,
Yeah, maybe they use that to move back up into like the 7th or 4th. We have I think the 4th or 5th pick in the 4th round. So there's still going to be some talent there. Maybe they use that to move back up in the 4th or latter part of the 3rd round. I think that Bill O'Brien has talked a lot about veteran players and getting guys that can make impact immediately. With OTAs and training camps and rookie mini camps most likely being postponed, we don't really know what these guys are going to be able to do in camp, how much they'll be able to prepare. It's going to be a virtual offseason, it seems like. So, I don't think that's a crazy thought at all. I think that there's a good chance that those 3 picks are bundled to be able to move up and grab another potential player. Again, it's going to have to be somebody that Bill O'Brien is in love with. And we all know that when Bill O'Brien loves a player,
he'll go get him. Yeah, and then, that's the thing. And he said it himself in this press conference that this is going to be a veteran, season. And that's why we see, the Brandon Cooks trade, the David Johnson trade. So let's get started. David Johnson, what do you think about what he could bring to the Texans? I personally think, if healthy, the dude could be a monster because he was an MVP a couple years ago. Let's be honest. I had him on my fantasy team. The dude was an absolute monster. I think he could do real good for this Houston Texans team.
I think that the injury-prone word gets thrown around a little too much for me. When you look at David Johnson, yes, he missed all of 2017 with a wrist injury after a productive season of over 2,000 yards from scrimmage between receiving and rushing. And then I think I just wrote an article about him, and I encourage everybody to go read it. I think for people that have questions about what David Johnson could bring to this team, I think this will answer a lot of that. But in 2018, he still, I believe, had almost 1,400 yards from scrimmage. He had 4 brand new offensive linemen, a defensive-minded head coach there was terrible play calling on the offense. And he was able to still produce around 14, I think it was 14 or 50, about 1,400 yards. I think
he had 1,400 yards and like 900 and something rushing yards.
Yeah, and 10 TDs. So I think I think David Johnson will be extremely good for this team. I think that there's a lot to be said about being wanted. And I think that's one part that people aren't realizing from the press conferences that David Johnson has already done. He's mentioned 4 or 5 times that he appreciates Bill O'Brien coming and getting him. There's a part as a human, right, that, if you're wanted, you get a boost of serotonin in your head. You're like, this feels great. Everybody wants to feel wanted. And for players, it's the same thing. And I think David Johnson's going to come in. And I do think that he's going to be a very productive player for this team. So
I think he's going to be just an absolute, just monster. Moving on to the Brandon Cooks trade. A lot of people didn't like it. I personally loved it. I've been a fan of Brandon Cooks since he was at Oregon. I think he has elite speed. He has underrated hands. I think if the Texans use him correctly, this could be just, another Legion of Zoom like the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm super excited for what Brandon Cooks could bring to this Houston Texans team.
Yeah, I love the addition of Brandon Cooks. I think, another guy that gets injury prone tagged to him. While he does have 5 concussions over the last 6 years, he's still only missed 2 games. I think another part that you kind of left out about Brandon Cooks is that he's an elite route runner as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the things that separates Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks from like the Tyreek Hills and the other speedy guys in this league is both of those guys are top tier route runners. So when you're able to combine that route running ability with their 4.3 speed, they're dangerous weapons. I think also another aspect of Brandon Cooks is just the fact that we've seen over the last 2 years when Will Fuller goes down how stagnant this offense becomes.
Absolutely.
We're talking about going from 24 to 25 points average to 16, 17. So with Brandon Cooks being added, you still have Kenny Stills opposite of Cooks. If Fuller goes down, you have Cobb in the slot. You have the potential of still running that same offense and getting people involved and still scoring points. There should be no drop off if Will Fuller does get hurt this season. So I think that's a big piece of what's going on. While we'll all miss DeAndre Hopkins played, I think it was like 49% of his snaps in the slot last season. So I think this team's going to be a lot better than what people expect as far as the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I agree. And like I said, I love DeAndre Hopkins. The first, when he got drafted, I had to literally convinced my dad to let me stay up, to watch it because I was a freshman in high school. But but I think this offense will be better. And like I said, it's gonna be a pick your poison offense, in my opinion, because if you focus on Fuller, Stills is gonna burn you, and then Cooks is gonna burn you, and then when you move your defense back, David Johnson is just going to eat up. And not only that, Tim Kelly's now calling the plays. So would you see this offense getting much more better?
I think this offense is going to be much more balanced. I think with the addition of Brandon Cooks and David Johnson, I think there's a ton of flexibility within this offense. I think when you look at what, if you're playing 2 safeties deep and you got Fuller and Cooks on the outside, well, guess what? David Johnson, Duke Johnson, Randall Cobb, Darren Fells, and my star of this offense that people are not talking about at all is Jordan Akins. Jordan Akins is going to emerge this year, and I really hope people start to pay attention. I'm actually in the process right now. Before we hopped on, I'm breaking down Deshaun's film, and I'm putting out a thread today of just him throwing to everybody but DeAndre. 1, so it could be salty to all the people that are so upset about DeAndre gone. And then 2, just to show that what these other guys have. And when you watch Jordan Akins, top 5 in yak yardage last year for tight ends, he's always open. And I just think he's going to have a hell of a year. So when you add all of those into this offense, it's going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be a pick your poison. You want to stop the deep balls? Fantastic. We're going to eat you alive underneath. You want to stop the underneath stuff? We're going to break you down deep. So it's going to be, whether it works or not is yet to be seen, but man, it's going to be tons of fun to watch.
So that's what I was about to ask you, because now you're getting me all excited, right? Do you think Bill O'Brien could handle all this?
Handle what specifically?
Just like, the whole narrative of this season on his shoulders, losing DeAndre, that's basically it, right? Just losing DeAndre, he's an all-pro wide receiver, and having all this extra stuff. Do you think he, as a head coach, will be able to handle this?
I think Bill O'Brien is in a better position this year to handle everything that's happening than he has been in years past. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's turning over play calling to Tim Kelly. I think my biggest issue with Bill O'Brien, and has been since he joined this team, is that he takes too much on himself. He doesn't delegate as a head coach. He kind of just runs it all the way through. I want to see him delegate. I want to see him manage the team, very similar to how Vrabel does in Tennessee. Vrabel is not an offensive-minded coach.
No.
He's a great defensive player, but he also was a terrible defensive coordinator for us. He lets his DC and OC really just kind of build the game plan and install it, and he just manages it. I'd love to see Bill O'Brien take that role on and really start to delegate. Let Weaver do what he wants to do. Let Tim Kelly do what he wants to do. If he sees some things that needs to be changed, he adds his input. But outside of that, he lets them kind of go and gives them some rope. And I think that we'll see that this year.
And speaking of Weaver, right, he comes from that Rex Ryan system, from that dog that beats defensive system. How do you think he's going to translate to a defensive coordinator for this Houston Texans team?
So Anthony Weaver is highly respected around the league. He's done a ton of good things for this team, specifically on the defensive line. I know there's a lot of talk about the Rex Ryan aspect of what Anthony Weaver brings. I'm hoping that he brings pieces of that to this. My biggest concern with Weaver is that we see a very similar thing to what we saw when Mike Vrabel took over as DC, where Romeo Crennel's fingerprints are all over the defense, and it's not Anthony Weaver being able to do it. He's more like a puppet on strings with Romeo Crennel. But I think this team is a lot different than that year. I think that we have a much faster defense, with Roby, Conley, Zach Cunningham, Justin Reed, whoever else we had in the draft, Charles Omenihu, so Jacob Martin. So I think that Weaver has the potential to do really big things for this. It's just going to be about, will he be able to do it and control it and manage it? And if that's the case, I think we're in a good spot. First-year defensive coordinators that are promoted within don't tend to do a really good job their first year. It's usually more of a learning year. So we have to hope that the offense can pick it up and let Weaver develop himself.
Well, one thing we know for sure is that me and you are both going to be watching every single step of the way. But there you have it, guys. We were only supposed to talk about the draft, but we just, we love this team so much, even though they break our hearts. We love this team no matter what. Ari, man, thank you again for coming on the show. Hopefully we can have you on again, and hopefully I could join you on your stuff, man. You're doing an excellent job. The best podcaster for Houston Texans football.
Nah, thank you so much. Anytime you want me on, you just shoot me a text or send me a DM. I'm always free for you.
Yes, sir. And as always, guys, hey, this is a new league year. It starts today, guys. Some teams are going to make their Super Bowl push today. Hopefully we do that. Hopefully we're trending in the right direction. As always, guys, go Houston Texans. You guys have a blessed day.